Hi, I'm BZ Rieger. It's March 24th, 2020, and I'm continuing in my series that relates to choosing fear or knowing. And this one is all about catching a glimpse, looking below the surface to catch a glimpse of the unseen enemy. And if you've caught any headlines or noticed any of President Trump's pressers about the coronavirus and all that's going on there, you'll see he keeps referring to that. And he keeps referring to the war that we're in. So I'll do a conversation on how you can see there are many different conversations going on to many different audiences at the same time. But I wanted to focus on and play with a few data points that will help you glimpse what's going on, glimpse seeing the unseen enemy. And probably need to back up a little in talking about what's really going on, in talking about waking up to what's really so and what has been really so on the planet, that it's a prison planet that we're in, with the overarching, the whole control mechanism is the financial slavery system, which is coming down. But many people have no idea. They just think that the world is the way the world is, and stupid shit happens, or you're constricted here, constricted there, and you just do the best you can and make a life. And yeah, if you're going along and not understanding what's going on, that is, the best you can do. What's happening in this moment, in this war, in the final moments of this war, is breaking that all down and realizing what has been there, and then reaping the benefits of this all being torn down. So there are controllers of the planet, and there is a whole system that guides and orchestrates and kind of moves all of the pieces of the system. And the system is an inverted matrix. It's an inverted false construct. So one way to understand that is everything that you thought was the way that a system or structure or sector or anything works is actually inverted. The way you've been taught that that's how it works is an inversion of how it actually works. Whether it's the financial system, whether it's the justice system, whether it's the Child Protective Services system, whether it's medical systems, education systems, everything. Every system, every sector, every structure is it's actually inverted. And what we're seeing right now is that inversion, so that upside downness of what we think is so, is being revealed. And with that revealing, the information now is then being correctly turned, which, if you're still on the view, if your lens of focus and how you read the world is not knowing the truth of what's going on, you'll think that everything's flipped upside down. That not only is the world chaotic, but things seem to be flipping on their head. So again, this is just to give you a glimpse of this. It's a huge subject, and from my feeling, it's best to do it in small bites and let you play with whatever you wish to play with and encounter it and help you catch sight of, catch hearing of, catch a knowing of other little pieces as you go throughout your day. And you yourself will start to slot them in and line them up, and the dots will start connecting for you, and you'll see a new picture emerging. Most importantly, you'll feel a new picture emerging. So I wanted to play with just a few data points, kind of see now that I present them if you're looking at them in a different way. One of them is Justice Scalia's death, or murder. And do you think, you think of the office of Supreme Court justices. So it's the highest court in the land, purportedly, and the office carries a certain weight, and it's the Justice Department, the very height of that, the judicial branch. And wouldn't you think, if there's an unattended death in your neighborhood, that someone's going to come, the police come, and they do an investigation? Okay, so that's just the premise. So we have a Supreme Court justice who has an unattended death. There's no autopsy. There's no investigation. And again, looking at purely from the position of the office, right? And all of the weight that holds, the office of the presidency of the United States. The president does not attend the funeral of the Supreme Court justice who had no autopsy, was cremated, so no further investigation could be done, and there was no investigation to begin with. So that's just some data points to play with, thinking about, in the normal way. Maybe that's a little weird, because if your neighbor, someone heard that your neighbor died, there'd be an investigation. They would want to find out what's going on. Okay, so another data point to play with. That's actually related, although that's another data point you'll find out at some point, is the Tarmac Meeting, the Tarmac Meeting, which is much talked about. Go look about it if you're not familiar with it, between President Clinton and Loretta Lynch. And also the findings of the IG report with Horowitz that totally uncovered the discrepancies between the information given by both President Clinton and Attorney General Loretta Lynch about that meeting and what was actually found on that. So those are some other data points there to look into. They actually are related to the first data point I gave you, which is Justice Scalia. Another data point to look at, actually, as you'll find, everything is connected, everything is related. All of these things, everything in your own personal world and everything else out there, is part of a tapestry that is woven together that creates the false construct story and will help you decode it so that you can see what's really going on, then either make the choice to go into fear, because with a narrow construct there would be an awful lot to be afraid of, or to choose knowing and then step into your own internal knowing and step into your own sovereignty, your own incredible power to decode all of what's been going on and allow yourself to be now in a knowing space. So the next data point I wanted to play with is North Korea. And just to think about leading up to the whole peace process and the conversations and negotiations and the talk that President Trump was having about that. Very little media coverage, and what the media has in the United States and what the media has been covering and how they've covered it are huge data points. But I just want to look at specifically on North Korea. So very little coverage about that at the beginning stages, many of the stages. Now again, thinking about how as a collective the world, particularly the United States, has held North Korea as the boogeyman, as this horrible fear we have to hide under our beds because they're going to launch nukes at us and the world will end and all that kind of stuff. Okay, great, reasonable, given all of the programming and all the hype and all of the news reports. So with that, now you have something occurring where there's discussion, there's actual action being taken, there's negotiations, there's a very public through President Trump's tweets and lots of other channels that way, aside from the mainstream media, where this is occurring. Yet no one's talking about it. Yet it's not on the news. This is not front page news. It's not, leading the news broadcasts. That's an interesting data point. And as it gets a little closer to the possible peace, the only coverage that seems to be happening is criticism of, well, you're not doing the peace process right. We have never acknowledged through the media that there was a peace process, and hey, we could actually get rid of the boogeyman and we could all be safer and sleep better. So that's an interesting point. Then as we get to the walk, so when President Trump walked across the DMZ to shake hands, again, lots of media coverage from outlets in different parts of the world, British outlets, European outlets, not that much from the United States mainstream media coverage, and about that momentous occasion and what really was going on there, and how did it happen so fast when all these years it wasn't happening before. And look at the players, China and others involved in that. So that's that whole pack there around North Korea. And it's just come up again recently where President Trump in his different pressers about the coronavirus has mentioned that he was asked the question, it was mentioned that he sent a letter to North Korea. So why is that coming up now, and how are those related? Just some data points to play with. The last one in this I just wanted to touch on is the World Health Organization, WHO. There are many organizations in the globalized scheme, the New World Order scheme that has been almost reached, that are absolutely not what they're painted as, what we think they are. So you would think that the World Health Organization is an organization that is dedicated to the world's health in an expansive, holistic, happy, well-being sort of way. That would be a data point for you to look into, because that's not the case. But what I wanted to bring forward is in particularly related to the World Health Organization and the coronavirus, that in January they tweeted that the coronavirus was not transferable between human to human, bringing up the company line of the Chinese. And not that long after that, all of a sudden now they've gotten on the new playbook, because there is a playbook behind all of this, particularly around the coronavirus. Now they have, right on schedule, have declared it a pandemic. And why do I say right on schedule? Because there's catastrophe bonds. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but there was a financial instrument, a financial product developed by the World Bank to issue catastrophe bonds. And different countries, different groups, different organizations could then buy into these bonds, and the marketing on the bond is that when the bond is purchased, that's a way for them to invest actually in protection. So they invest in these bonds and they have a maturity, and with the collective investment that all those people who've purchased into that, it grows the pool of money. And so if they ever did have a catastrophe, if they ever did have any of those things, they could then, the individuals who had invested in that could draw on the money, could draw on the appreciation of that investment to help defer costs for some kind of catastrophe that may arise for them. Like the way you see other financial instruments are, purported to be and how they work. But with the catastrophe bonds, and in particular the ones around the pandemic, if a virus, the coronavirus and other things, were scheduled and declared a pandemic before a certain date, that would trigger all the bonds, meaning that all of the entities, all of the organizations, all of those who had bought into and paid in money to that would default. They would all be triggered, they would all be called, and all of those who had paid into that would have lost money. Okay, so keep playing with this data point and notice how the huge rush by the mainstream media in the United States push to lather the hysteria and to get you upset and to get you freaking out and to get you not thinking but just reacting, right? Instead of responding and acknowledging what's going on, watching what's going on, noticing what's going on, feeling into it. And that made a big, frappe of fear, which triggered reaction, which triggered sentiment, coupled with numbers of people, yes, testing positive, yes, having some illness and some outbreaks. All of those are true, and so, absolutely. But the fear was incongruent to the level of what was actually happening on the ground in different parts of the world, and the speed and the pace of that. And so that triggered the World Health Organization to issue it as a pandemic. Well before, I think it was June 16th was the deadline for that cutoff. Well before that time, right? So the push. And with that happening, then all of those things are triggered. All those bonds are triggered. And when that happens, because of the way it's orchestrated, the holder, so the World Bank who issued those, basically takes all that money. So it's a revenue generation point for them. So again, all those things go together, just a few data points to consider. And you could look into the individual ones, but what I'm wanting to play with here is there's so much underlying things that you can glimpse just below the surface. And like I said, you could dive into any one of these things. You could dive deep. It's a deep rabbit hole. And there's much correlation and cross-connection between all of them. But simply noticing them and glimpsing underneath and realizing just in the seemingly, unrelated things that I mentioned here, there is relationship to them and there is connection to them that you can see with just a glimpse. Helps you to start to understand that what we feel or may tune into just on a surface because we're busy, because life is going on, because we've got to work a lot to pay in the system, we're the only living being that has to pay to live on planet Earth. And so we can glimpse all of that. And it's helpful because, again, we don't have to dive into those rabbit holes, but it's giving validation to our own knowing, whether we're paying attention to it just a little bit or a lot, that something's not quite right here. And now that I think about it, something hasn't been feeling right to me for a long time. But, well, that's just Washington, or that's just politics, or that's just a war thing, and we have to deal with it. But we're in these moments now, where the final moments of the war, and it's not so silent, the war anymore, and the unseen enemy is not so unseen anymore. And pretty soon here, which is why there's this call out for all of us to bring this information forward, to connect with people, to help them, the way I would describe it is moving from fear, to the choice of fear, to the choice of knowing, and empowerment, and the truth of who you are. To look at that and feel into that. So I'm going to leave this one here, and I have others that we can look into with, again, different ways. What I'm wanting to do is to balance, going back to the analogy I gave before of newspaper, big newspaper, and below the fold and above the fold, and balance the linear with the multidimensionality. Balance, what's happening out there and what's happening within you inside, in all of your systems, all of your bodies, mental, emotional, electromagnetic, ethereal, physical, all of those bodies, and the changes that are occurring as we move through and move from the crumbling down, the unwinding and unbinding of the false construct, and the emerging, the burgeoning of the new story, the new earth, what is coming, what we've all created, some not having any understanding on how you're doing that, but you are, created the new thing. So I just want to leave you with one last thought, and that is, I saw this interesting tweet. Someone had made a video, and he, young, I don't know, maybe mid-40s gentleman, was talking about, and he was very emotional because he was so excited to see things crumbling down, and that transparency and accountability would come forth all over the planet for what has really been going on, and how he was excited about that, and so sad for himself and for others who have no idea what's going on. And his heart was in empathy for those who don't have a clue and would be waking up rather quickly to what's going on, and how that could be difficult for them. So I feel that too. I feel that urgency. I feel that empathic desire to bring forward conversations, bring forward connections that can help you move to a new noticing point and change the aperture and the focus of your consciousness so that it gets wider and wider and wider, and you can see, with more light coming in, you can see what's really going on. And it changes everything. It brings a calmness when there are points of fear. And it brings an exhilaration to realize that the world is not at all what we thought it was. And it is and will be more beautiful, more expansive and amazing than we could ever have thought possible. Because we're creating that possibility. We're creating that reality, that tangible, touchable reality. So something to play with and notice. I love you.